The locomotive's horn continued echoing through the darkness. Long, deep, ancient, Daniel had heard countless trains during transportation investigations. Freight trains, passenger trains, steam locomotives preserved in museums. Modern high-speed rail, this wasn't any of them. The sound carried something else, not metal, not machinery, memory. As though every train that had ever disappeared was blowing its whistle at the same time. The archive remained completely dark. No emergency lights, no warning indicators, only the distant rhythm of steel wheels somewhere beneath the endless shelves. Clack, 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 perfectly steady, slowly approaching. Daniel could barely make out Aliner's silhouette beside him. Can anyone turn the lights back on? No one answered. Instead, the first keeper quietly spoke. They won't. A faint white glow slowly appeared far ahead, not from the ceiling. From the floor, thin lines of pale light began spreading across the black stone like cracks in frozen ice. They stretched between the shelves, intersected, merged. Daniel watched as an enormous map slowly revealed itself beneath their feet. Railway tracks. Thousands of them glowing beneath the stone. They crossed continents. Oceans, mountains, every forgotten railway, every abandoned tunnel, every unfinished line, connected, one enormous network. What am I looking at? Daniel whispered. The first keeper didn't take his eyes off the glowing map, the original railway. There isn't one, there is a pause. Every railway ever built is only a fragment of it. The distant train whistle sounded again. Closer this time. The glowing tracks beneath their feet trembled. One section slowly illuminated, brighter than all the others. Japan. Another, Washington, then a third, somewhere beneath the Alps, then Iceland, Norway, Ukraine. The lights connected one after another until they formed a single continuous route. Michael looked terrified. It's choosing. Daniel frowned. Choosing what? Michael didn't answer. Without warning, one of the archive shelves collapsed, not outward, inward. As though gravity itself had reversed, the steel cabinet folded silently into darkness. The floor beneath it disappeared. A narrow tunnel opened below. Daniel stepped closer. Cold air rushed upward. He looked down. There was no bottom, only railway tracks disappearing into endless darkness. A signal lamp beside the tunnel suddenly lit green. No, the first keeper whispered. It found another station. Daniel turned toward him. What station? The keeper closed his eyes. There were 13. A pause. We believed we had sealed them all. Aliner slowly approached the opening. Her face had become pale. I remember this. Daniel looked at her. You've been here? No. She shook her head. I've arrived here. The distinction sent another chill through him. The distant train was no longer distant. Now everyone could hear its steam. Steel, the slow grinding of ancient wheels. It was climbing. Not across land, upward, toward them, toward the archive. The stranger looked genuinely frightened for the first time. Close the gate. The first keeper didn't move. We can't. Why? He answered without looking away from the tunnel. Because it isn't. Entering. A long pause. We are standing on its platform. Daniel slowly looked around. The endless archive suddenly felt different. The shelves, the lamps, the stone floor, the enormous chamber, all of it. He finally understood. This wasn't simply an archive. It had been designed like a railway terminal. The endless aisles resembled platforms. The steel shelves stood exactly where passengers might once have waited. The black stone floor was built above tracks. The realization struck him like ice. The archive, he whispered, was built over the station. The first keeper slowly nodded. Yes, a powerful blast of cold air erupted from the tunnel. Dust spiraled upward. Old paper scattered through the chamber. Then a beam of light appeared far below, warm, golden, growing brighter. It rounded a distant curve. Daniel could now hear the locomotive clearly. Not fast, not aggressive, simply arriving. Michael slowly stepped backward. His voice barely escaped his lips. The last train. The first keeper lowered his head. We were hoping it would never return. The light beneath them grew brighter. The rails began vibrating. A deep mechanical bell echoed through the darkness. Then an old station announcement crackled into existence, distorted, broken by static, yet unmistakably clear. Final arrival. Static, platform red, more static, passengers who remember. The announcement dissolved into noise. Daniel looked toward Aliner. She whispered only one sentence, the people who disappear. Her eyes filled with tears. They never vanish. The train whistle sounded one final time, and the locomotive entered the light. The locomotive came to a stop without the slightest screech. There was no grinding of brakes. No burst of steam, only silence, as though it had been standing there for centuries waiting for them to arrive. The warm golden beams of its headlights slowly swept across the black walls of the tunnel, casting impossibly long shadows over the towering shelves of the endless archive. Daniel couldn't look away. The locomotive belonged to no era he recognized. Its front resembled a steam engine from the late 19th century. Its massive side mechanisms looked more advanced than any modern electric locomotive. There was no firebox. No smokestack. No place where fuel should have burned, yet it was alive. It breathed, slowly, rhythmically. Warm air escaped through narrow vents that looked disturbingly similar to the gills of some enormous creature. Without realizing it, Daniel took a step forward. Don't. The first keeper's voice was sharper than Daniel had ever heard before. He hasn't decided yet. Daniel frowned. Decided what? The keeper never took his eyes off the train. Who he will take this time. The doors of the first carriage slowly opened. Warm light poured into the chamber, soft, comforting, completely unlike the cold, white lights of the archive. Daniel expected to see empty seats. Instead, the carriage was full. Dozens of passengers sat perfectly still, men, women, children, each dressed in the clothing of a different century. An American railway conductor from the early 1900s, a soldier wearing a World War II uniform, a Japanese schoolgirl, a Norwegian train operator, a Ukrainian locomotive engineer, a Mexican woman holding an old leather suitcase. No one spoke. No one looked at one another. Every pair of eyes stared silently forward. As though waiting for the next station, Daniel felt his breathing stop. Who are they? The first keeper answered almost in a whisper. Passengers. Passengers of what? The last route. Alina slowly stepped closer. The color drained from her face. No. Daniel turned toward her. What is it? She slowly raised one trembling hand. The third window. Daniel followed her gaze, then froze. A man sat beside the glass, gray suit, tie, round glasses. An official archive folder rested on his lap. Daniel knew that face. Impossible. He had seen it only once, in an old missing persons file. Richard Hayes, archive investigator, disappeared in 1973. His body had never been found. Yet now he sat quietly inside the carriage, exactly as he had appeared on the day he vanished. Not one day older. Daniel instinctively stepped closer. Hayes slowly turned his head. Their eyes met. Then, almost imperceptibly, Hayes shook his head. A silent warning. Don't come at that exact moment. The doors of the second carriage opened. A single figure stepped onto the platform. A conductor, tall, unnaturally thin. He wore a perfectly pressed dark navy uniform with no insignia of any railway company. A black cap shadowed nearly his entire face. Only his eyes could be seen. Calm, pale, almost colorless, without speaking. He stopped beside the locomotive, then slowly opened a small leather ledger. Daniel heard Michael inhale sharply. No, the conductor ran one finger down the page as though checking a passenger list. Then he looked up, not at Alina, not at Michael, straight at Daniel. After several silent seconds, he calmly turned the page. He's looking for someone, Daniel whispered. The first keeper slowly closed his eyes. He always is. Suddenly, the ancient station loudspeaker crackled to life once again. This time the announcement was clearer. Older, calmer, final destination. Silence. The archive. Another pause. Now boarding. The words echoed through the endless archive. Then something impossible happened. One by one, every passenger inside the carriage slowly turned their head. At exactly the same moment, dozens of faces now looked directly at Daniel. There was no anger, no fear, only exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes after waiting for far too long. Then Daniel noticed someone else, far back in the last carriage, almost hidden by darkness. A lone figure sat beside the window. The face remained concealed, but the clothing, dark navy archive suit, government identification badge hanging from the neck. Daniel narrowed his eyes, his blood turned to ice. The badge read, Daniel Carter. No, he whispered, that's impossible. The man slowly lifted his head. His face was Daniel's, every feature identical. Only older, more tired, marked by years of unbearable sorrow. The older Daniel gently placed one hand against the glass as though trying to warn him or perhaps to say goodbye. Without warning, every light inside the tunnel went out. Only two sources of light remained, the locomotive's golden headlights and the emerald glow of the old railway signal far ahead in the darkness. A station bell rang once, twice, 3 times. The conductor slowly raised one hand, then made a single gesture. An invitation. The train was ready to receive its next passenger. The conductor didn't move. His hand remained extended. The invitation still stood. Silence filled the endless archive so completely that Daniel could hear the beating of his own heart. Then, the first passenger stepped off the train. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't anyone standing beside him. It was Richard Hayes. He slowly descended the narrow steel steps. His shoes touched the black stone floor without making a sound. Hayes stopped only a few feet from Daniel. His eyes were alive, exhausted, but undeniably alive. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't an illusion. He was simply there. Several long seconds passed before Hayes finally spoke. I knew you would come someday. His voice was rough, like someone who hadn't spoken in decades. Daniel stared at him in disbelief. You're Richard Hayes? The man slowly nodded. I was. You disappeared. Yes, in 1973, a faint, sorrowful smile crossed Hayes' face. For you, he paused, not for me. A cold shiver ran through Daniel's body. What does that mean? Hayes looked toward the locomotive. Time doesn't move forward here. He looked back at Daniel. It moves in circles. Michael nervously glanced around the chamber. We have to leave now. The first keeper remained perfectly still. His eyes never left the tunnel. We're already too late. Daniel stepped closer. How long have you been here? Hayes frowned, as though trying to remember a number that had lost all meaning. If you're counting by your world's time, about 53 years. He paused, or a few minutes. He quietly shook his head. Here, they're the same thing. Without warning, every clock Daniel carried suddenly came to life. His wristwatch, his phone, his government-issued chronometer. The hands began spinning wildly, forward, backward, then in impossible directions. Dates flashed across every display: 1987, 2029, 1964, 2041, 1973, 2036, as though time itself could no longer decide what year it truly was. Daniel's phone suddenly went black. Then the screen lit again. Only one message appeared. Next arrival, Daniel Carter. Daniel. Alina whispered. He silently showed her the screen. The color drained from her face. It has already chosen. At that moment, the locomotive released a slow breath of warm white steam. The doors of the third carriage quietly opened. No passengers sat inside. Only one empty row remained in the center. Beside the window, as though it had been reserved for a single traveler, a neatly folded dark navy archive jacket rested on the seat beside it. A government identification badge. Daniel slowly stepped closer. His heart stopped. The badge read, Archive Keeper Daniel Carter. No, Alina whispered, don't look. But it was already too late. Daniel caught his reflection in the carriage window. At first, it was normal. Then, it slowly began to change. His hair turned gray. Wrinkles spread across his face. The light disappeared from his eyes. His dark navy archive suit slowly transformed into the long black coat worn by the keepers. The reflection looked directly back at him then. It smiled, not cruelly, not triumphantly, only with overwhelming sadness. As though it had always known this moment would come. Don't listen to it. Daniel turned sharply. Hayes was standing beside him once again. It doesn't speak with words. It shows possibilities. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? The train never forces anyone. Hayes answered quietly. It simply offers. Daniel's voice became barely audible. And if I refuse? Hayes remained silent, then finally answered. It will look for someone else. Michael took a step backward. Then let it. Hayes slowly turned toward him. For the first time, his expression became deadly serious. That's exactly what everyone before you said. At that moment, every passenger inside every carriage slowly stood together. Not a single sound echoed through the chamber. One by one, every carriage door opened. Dozens of people stepped onto the platform. No one wandered, no one hesitated. They silently formed two perfectly straight lines along both sides of the tunnel, creating a living corridor. Daniel carefully studied their faces. The longer he looked, the more he recognized them: archive investigators, railway engineers, dispatchers, locomotive operators, federal inspectors. Every one of them had once been reported missing. Every one of them had investigated an unexplained transportation anomaly. Every one of them had eventually arrived here. The first keeper slowly lowered his head. His voice carried more weight than ever before. They are not prisoners. Daniel looked at him. What? They are the crew. Those words were more terrifying than any scream. Silence swallowed the endless archive once again. Then the conductor took his first step toward Daniel, then another and another. In his hands he carried the old leather ledger. He opened it, slowly turned to the final page. Only a single blank line remained. The conductor raised his eyes, then silently extended an old black fountain pen toward Daniel, as though inviting him to write his own name. Daniel didn't take the pen. His hand froze in midair. Only a few inches separated his fingers from the old fountain pen, yet he couldn't bring himself to touch it. The conductor waited patiently. He didn't rush him. He didn't insist. He simply held the ledger open. The final blank line seemed impossibly deep, as though it had always existed for a single name, for a single decision. Don't sign it. Alina's voice echoed through the tunnel with surprising force. The conductor slowly turned his head for the first time. Daniel saw his face clearly. It was completely ordinary, not monstrous, not terrifying, simply ageless, as though this man had existed for as long as the railway itself. A faint smile appeared on his lips. He has already made his choice. Those were the first words the conductor had spoken since stepping off the train. His voice was unlike anything Daniel had ever heard. It sounded as though dozens of voices spoke at once. Young, old, male, female, all layered together into a single calm sentence. No. Daniel stepped backward. I haven't chosen anything. Without emotion, the conductor closed the leather ledger. Everyone who reaches this place has already made a choice. The first keeper slowly stepped between them. For the first time, he stood in the conductor's way. Enough. Silence followed. The conductor looked directly at him. You no longer have the authority to command. I know you are no longer a keeper. I know. Then why are you still here? The first keeper gave a quiet, sorrowful smile because I remember every passenger turned toward him at exactly the same moment, as though that single word had broken an ancient law. Remember. A strange vibration spread throughout the endless archive. The towering shelves began humming softly. Thousands of dark navy case folders slowly slid forward from the shelves by only a few inches. Daniel looked around in disbelief. Every single file emitted a faint white glow. The first keeper gently rested one hand upon the nearest folder. The archive doesn't preserve documents, his voice remained calm. It preserves memory. Daniel stared at him. All these files aren't records of events, the keeper slowly shook his head. They are records of the people who still remember those events as though responding to his words. Several folders suddenly crumbled into fine white dust. There was no fire, no wind, they simply ceased to exist at the exact same moment. Two passengers standing beside the far carriage quietly dissolved into the air, as though they had never been there at all. A wave of cold ran through Daniel. What's happening? The first keeper looked directly into his eyes. They've been forgotten. Elinor slowly turned. If everyone is forgotten, the keeper nodded. The archive will have nothing left to protect. Michael whispered. So that's why it gathers people. Yes, so they can remember. The keeper shook his head once more. No, so that someone can bear witness that they once existed. Daniel looked toward the locomotive. Then why does it want me? The conductor answered before the keeper could speak. Because you have seen the archive as it truly is. He slowly took another step forward. And those who see its true form never return unchanged. At that very moment, thousands of crimson warning lights illuminated throughout the endless archive. The entire chamber trembled. A new sound echoed from somewhere beneath the tunnel. Not the locomotive, not the rails, something far larger. A colossal mechanism. As though the entire structure had begun rotating deep beneath reality itself. The first keeper suddenly looked upward. For the first time since Daniel had met him, fear entered his voice. No. It has already begun. Daniel stared at him. What has? The keeper answered with only two words, Protocol Oblivion. Immediately, every shelf inside the endless archive began to move. The endless rows of steel shelving slowly shifted across the black stone floor. Corridors disappeared, new passages formed before their eyes. Beneath the polished floor, the glowing railway maps slowly began fading away, one route after another. Japan, Norway, Ukraine, Washington. The light disappeared as though history itself were being erased. Government monitoring screens suddenly flickered to life throughout the chamber. Every display showed the same message. Protocol Oblivion initiated, memory reset in progress. A violent pain exploded inside Daniel's head. Fragments of memory flashed before his eyes. The black door. The endless archive. The first keeper. The locomotive. Richard Hayes. Every memory began falling apart like old strips of film slowly burning inside a projector. Elinor grabbed his arm. Daniel, don't let yourself forget. Her voice already sounded impossibly distant, as though she were speaking from beneath deep water. Daniel tried to answer, but he could no longer remember. Why they were here, the conductor silently closed the leather ledger. There was no longer a blank line upon its final page, yet Daniel could no longer remember. Whose name had been written there? Daniel opened his eyes. His head throbbed with unbearable pain. An unnatural silence surrounded him. The endless archive was gone, the endless shelves gone, the black door gone. The tunnel gone, only the cold concrete floor of sublevel B2 remained beneath him. Above, old fluorescent lights buzzed softly as though nothing had ever happened. Daniel slowly sat up. His government flashlight lay beside him, his phone, his identification badge. Everything was exactly where it should have been. Elinor sat against a concrete wall. One hand pressed against her temple. Michael was slowly getting to his feet a few yards away. The stranger silently surveyed the empty corridor. The first keeper was gone. The train was gone. Daniel tried to remember. We found something. Elinor frowned. She stopped. The word had disappeared before she could speak it. Michael picked up an archive folder lying on the floor. It was empty. No documents, no photographs, no reports. Only a single label remained on the cover case, file #15 below it. An empty space. The title of the investigation had vanished. Daniel unlocked his phone. Recent calls, empty. Photo gallery, empty. Voice recordings, empty. Only one system notification remained. Archive incident resolved. No irregularities detected. Daniel stared at the screen for nearly a full minute. This isn't right. At that moment, the main lights of sublevel B2 switched on. A calm female voice echoed through the public address system. Attention. Archive personnel, scheduled maintenance has been completed. Please return to your assigned departments. Thank you for your cooperation. It sounded as though absolutely nothing had happened. Elinor slowly walked toward Daniel. Do you remember? She suddenly stopped. Her expression became strangely empty. Remember what? Daniel remained silent. He couldn't answer. he no longer knew. Together they walked back toward the elevator. The control panel looked perfectly ordinary. Buttons marked 7654321B1B2, no crimson button, no polished brass cover. Daniel slowly ran his fingers across the brushed stainless steel. Something felt missing, but whatever it was, he could no longer remember. The elevator doors quietly closed during the ride upward. No one spoke then for only the briefest instant. The cabin lights flickered. Daniel could have sworn the floor indicator displayed a single glowing letter. R. He blinked. A second later it simply read, 1. The following morning, 8:12 a.m., Daniel Carter entered his office. Fresh government correspondence waited neatly on his desk. Routine transportation investigations, police requests, accident reports, and a small cardboard archive box. No return address, no inventory number. He opened it. Inside rested several old hard drives, each one carefully sealed inside a transparent archival evidence bag. On top lay a short government memo. 2. Digital Forensics Division, origin of storage devices unknown. Each drive contains a single video recording. Daniel frowned. That's strange. A quiet knock came from the doorway. Alina Brooks stepped inside. Good morning, Daniel. Morning. She placed another file onto his desk. We've got a new investigation. I think you'll find this one interesting. Daniel smiled. What is it? Alina opened the folder. Across the first page, printed in bold black letters, were the words, Case File #14, the RED Room Protocol. Daniel stared at the title for several long seconds. For a fleeting moment, it felt familiar, as though he had seen those words before, somewhere long ago, in a dream or in another life. The feeling disappeared almost instantly. He opened the folder and began reading the first report. Far beneath the foundations of the National Transportation Archive, almost too distant to hear, a lonely locomotive whistle echoed once through the darkness. This time, no one remembered what it meant.